I'm going to be reading the book of Daniel, and I'm reading my NLT Bible. Let me start. Life Application Bible. Okay. So first it has a little paragraph article in it. The book of Daniel. So it says, an earthquake shakes the foundation of our security. A tornado blows away a lifetime of treasures. An assassin's bullet changes national history. A drunk driver claims an innocent victim. A divorce shatters a home. Terrorism frightens a nation. International and personal tragedies make our world seem a fearful place, overflowing with evil and seemingly out of control. And the latitude of bombings, coups, murders, and natural disasters could cause us to think that God is absent or opponent. Where is God? We cry, engulfied by sorrow and despair. 25 centuries ago, Daniel could have despaired. He and thousands of his countrymen had been deported to a foreign land after Judah was conquered. Daniel found himself facing an enigmatic despot and surrounded by adulterers. Instead of giving in or giving up, this courageous young man held fast to his faith in his God. Daniel knew that despite the circumstances, God was sovereign and was working out his plan for nations and individuals. The book of Daniel centers around this profound truth, the sovereignty of God. After a brief account of Nebuchadnezzar's siege and defeat of Jerusalem, the sense quickly shifts to Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. I don't know how to say that word. These men held prominent positions within the Babylonian government. Daniel in particular held such a position because of his ability to interpret the king's dreams that tell of God's unfolded plan. Chapters 2 and 4 of Daniel, sandwiched between the dreams, is his fascinating account of Daniel's three friends in the furnace, chapter 3. Because they refused to bow down to an image of gold, they were condemned to a fiery death, but God intervened and spared their lives. Belshazzar ruled Babylon after Nebuchadnezzar, and chapter 5 tells of his encounter with God's message written on a wall. Daniel, who was summoned to interpret the message, predicted Babylon's fall to the Medians and Persians. This prediction came true that very night, and Darius and Media conquered the Babylonian kingdom. Daniel became one of Darius's most trusted advisors. His privileged position angered other administrations who plotted his death by convincing the king to outlaw prayer. In spite of the law, Daniel continued to pray to his sovereign Lord. As a result, he was condemned to die in a den of hungry lions. Again, God intervened, saving him and shutting the mouths of the lions. Chapter 6 of Daniel. The book concludes with a series of visions that Daniel had during the reigns of Belshazzar, chapter 7, verse 8, Darius, chapter 9, and Cyrus, chapters 10 and 12. These dreams dramatically outline God's future plans, beginning with Babylon, continuing to the end of the age. They gave a preview of God's redemption and have been called the key to all biblical prophecy. God is sovereign. He was in control in Babylon, and he has been moving in history, controlling the destinies of people ever since, and he is here now. Despite the news reports of personal stress, we can be confident that God is in control. As you read Daniel, watch God work and find your security in his sovereignty. So we pray. Father God, while I'm reading the book of Daniel, give me wisdom as I'm reading, and pray for my social media people that they are okay and you help them in your will or whatever the problems they're having. And I pray that my channel is helpful, even though I just read the Bible and stuff and all that. Help me to stay strong and give me desires of your will. If it's your will, then that's all that matters, not my will. But thank you for waking me up this morning, and now I will continue to read the book of Daniel. So, Daniel chapter 1. Daniel's life, it says. So it has a little paragraph thingy. While Ezekiel was ministering to the captives in Babylon, Daniel was drafted as a counselor to King Nebuchadnezzar. With God's help, Daniel interpreted 2 of the king's dreams. Daniel's 3 friends were rescued from certain death in the blazing furnace, and Daniel was rescued from a lion's den. Daniel's life is a picture of the triumph of faith. May God grant us this type of faith, so that we may also live courageously each day. Daniel in Nebuchadnezzar court. During the 3rd year of King Jeroboam's reign in Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave him victory over King Jeroboam of Judah, and permitted him to take some of the sacred objects from the temple of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took them back to the land of Babylonia and placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenazar, his chef of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Select only strong, healthy, and good-looking young men, he said, and make sure they are well-versed in every branch of learning, are gifts with knowledge and good judgment, and are suited to serve in the royal palace. Train these young men in the language and literature of Babylon. The king assigned them a daily ration of food and wine from his own kitchens. They were to be trained for 3 years, and then they would enter the royal service. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were 4 of the young men chosen, all from the tribe of Judah. The chef of staff named them with these Babylonian names. Daniel was called Belshazzar, Hananiah was called Shadrach, Mishael was called Meshach, Azariah was called Ebed, I don't know how to say that, and Benjio, A as an apple, B as in boy, E as an elephant, D as in dog, N as in neater, E as an elephant, G, O, I don't know, But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king. He asked the chef of staff for permission not to eat these unsacramental foods. Now God has given the chef of staff both respect and affection for Daniel. But he responded, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has ordered that you eat this food and wine. If you become pale and thin compared to the other youth your age, I'm afraid the king will have me beheaded. Daniel spoke with a tenant who had been appointed by the chef of staff to look after Daniel, Hannah, Misha, and Azariah. Please test us for 10 days on a diet of vegetables and water, Daniel said. At the end of the 10 days, see how we look compared to the other men who are eating the king's food. Then make your decision in light of what you see. The attendant agreed to Daniel's suggestion and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and better nourished than the young man who had been eating the food assigned by the king. So after that, the tenant fed them only vegetables instead of the food and wine provided for the others. God gave these 4 men an unusual aptitude for understanding every aspect of literature and wisdom. And God gave Daniel the special ability to interpret the meaning of visions and dreams. When a training period ordered by the king was completed, the chief of staff brought all the young men to King Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and no one oppressed him as much as Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the royal service. Whenever the king consulted them in any matter requiring wisdom, and enchanters balanced the judgment, he found them 10 times more capable than any of the magicians and enchanters in the entire kingdom. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus. Chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar's dream. One night during the 2nd year in his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had such a disturbing dream that he couldn't sleep. He called in his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers, and he demanded that they tell him what he had dreamed. As they stood before the king, he said, I have a dream that deeply troubles me, and I must know what it means. Then the astrologers answered the king in the vermin, Long live the king, tell us the dream, and we will tell you what it means. But the king said to the astrologers, I am serious about this. If you don't tell me my dream was and what it means, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. But if you tell me what I dream and what the dream means, I will give you many wonderful gifts and honors. Just tell me the dream and what it means. They said again, please, your majesty, tell us the dream and we will tell you what it means. The king replied, I know what you're trying to do. I know what you are doing. You're stalling for time because you know I am serious when I say, if you don't tell me the dream, you're doomed. So you have conspired to tell me lies, hoping I will change my mind. But tell me the dream, and then I will know that you can tell me what it means. The astrologers replied to the king, no one on earth can tell the king his dream, and no king, however great and powerful, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. The king's demand is impossible. No one except the gods can tell you your dream, and they do not live here among the people. The king was furious when he heard this, and he ordered that all the wise men of Babylon be executed. And because of the king's decree, men were sent to find and kill Daniel and his friends. When Etcher, the commander of the king's guard, came to kill them, Daniel handled the situation with wisdom and discretion. He asked Etcher, "Why has the king issued such a harsh decree?" So Etcher told him all that had happened. Daniel went at once to see the king and requested more time to tell the king what the dream meant. Then Daniel went home and told his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah what had happened. He urged them to ask God of heaven to show them his mercy by telling them the secret, so they would not be executed along with the other wise men of Babylon. That night the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. He said, "Praise the name of God forever and ever, for he has all wisdom and power. He can control the course of the world events. He removes kings instead of other kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the scholars. He reveals deep and mysterious things and knows what lies hidden in darkness, though he is surrounded by light. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors, for have given me wisdom and strength. You have told me what we asked of you and revealed to us what the king demanded." Daniel interpreted the dream. Then Daniel went to see Arach from the king had ordered to execute the wise of Babylon. Daniel said to him, "Don't kill the wise man. Take me to the king, and I will tell him the meaning of his dream." Arach quickly looked Daniel to the king and said, "I have found one of the captives from Judah who will tell the king the meaning of his dream." The king said to Daniel, also known as Belshazzar, "Is this true? Can you tell me what my dream was and what it means?" Daniel replied, "There are no wise men, enchanters, magicians, or fortune tellers who can reveal the king's secret, but there is a God in heaven who reveals secrets, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the future. Now I will tell you your dream and the visions you saw as you lay on your bed." While your majesty was sleeping, you dreamed about coming events. He who reveals secrets has shown me what is going to happen, and it is not because I am wiser than anyone else that I know the secret of your dream, but because God wants you to understand what was in your heart. In your vision, your majesty, you saw standing before you a huge shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. The head of the statue was made of fine gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. As you watch, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not a human hand. It struck the feet of iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. Then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on a threshing floor. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth. That was the dream. Now we will tell the king what it means, your majesty. You are the greatest of kings. The God of heaven has given you sovereignty, power, strength, and honor. He has made you the ruler over all the inhabited world, and has put even the wild animals and birds under your control. You are the head of gold. But after your kingdom comes to an end, another kingdom inferior to yours will rise to take your place. After that kingdom has fallen, yet a third kingdom represents by bronze will rise to rule the world. Following that kingdom, there will be a fourth one, as strong as iron. That kingdom will smash and crush all previous empires. just as iron smashes and crushes everything it strikes. The feet and toes you saw were a combination of iron and baked clay, showing that this kingdom would be divided. Like iron mixed with clay, it will have some of the strength of iron. But while some parts of it will be as strong as iron, other parts will be as weak as clay. This mixture of iron and clay also shows that these kingdoms will try to strengthen themselves by forming alliances with each other through intermarriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron and clay do not mix. During the reigns of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed or conquered. It will crush all these kingdoms into nothingness, and it will be stand forever. That is the meaning of the rock cut from the mountain, from not by human hands, that crushed to pieces the statue of iron, bronze, clay, silver, and gold. The great God was showing the king what will happen in the future. The dream is true, and its meaning is certain. The head of gold of the statue in the dream represents Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of Babylon Empire, and the silver chest and two arms represent the Mede-Persian Empire, which conquered Babylon in 539 BC. The belly and thighs of bronze were Greece and Macedonia under Alexander the Great, who conquered the Median-Persian Empire in 330 BC. The legs of iron represent Rome, which conquered the Greeks in 63 BC. The feet of clay and iron represent the breaking of the Roman Empire when the territory of Rome grew divided into a mixture of strong and weak nations. The type of metal in each part depicted the strength of the political power of its representative. The rock cut out of the mountain divided the God's kingdom, which would be ruled eternally by the Messiah. The King of Kings, the dream revealed Daniel's God as power behind all earthly kingdoms. God's kingdom will never be destroyed, and if you are upset by threats of war and the prosperity of evil leaders, remember that God, not world leaders, decides the outcome of history. Under God's protection, God's kingdom is indestructible. Those who trust in God are members of His kingdom and are secure in Him. So Nebuchadnezzar rewards Daniel for interpreting the dream. The king Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him, and he commanded his people to offer sacrifices and burn sweet incense before him. The king said to Daniel, "Truly your God is the greatest of gods, the Lord over kings, a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal the secret." Then the king appointed Daniel to a high position and gave him many valuable gifts. He made Daniel ruler over the whole province of Babylon, as well as chief over all his wise men. At Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to be in charge of all the affairs of the province of Babylon. While Daniel remained in the king's court, Nebuchadnezzar was honoring Daniel and Daniel's God. If Daniel had taken the credit himself, the king would have honored only Daniel. Because Daniel gave God the credit, the king honored both of them. Part of our mission in this world is to show unbelievers what God is like. We can do that by acts of love and compassion. And if we give God's credit for our actions, they will want to know more about Him. So give thanks to God for what He is doing in and through you. After being named ruler over the whole province of Babylon and placed in charge of the wise men, Daniel requested his companions, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, to be such an enormous responsibility without capable assistance. So he chose the best men he knew, his 3 Hebrew companions. A cabinet leader never does all the work alone. He or she knows how to delegate and supervise Moses, Israel's greatest leader, shared the burden of administration with dozens of assistants. The story is in Exodus chapter 18, verse 13, verse 27. So we're in chapter 3, Daniel chapter 3. So Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide and set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then he sent messengers to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, and treasurers, judges. Messengers sent all the prominent officials to come to the dedication of the statue he set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then the hearer shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyres, harp, pipes, and other musicians' instruments, bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So at the sound of the musical instruments, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language, bowed to the ground and worshipped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the extraorders went to the king in the form of the Jews. They said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, "Long live the king! You issued a decree requiring all the peoples to bow down and worship the gold statue. When they hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and other musical instruments." That decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage and ordered that Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from my power." Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship your gold statue you have set up." We don't know if other Jews refused to fall down and worship the statue, but these three were signed out as public examples. Why didn't the three men just bow to the image and tell God that they didn't mean it? They had determined never to worship another God, and they courageously took their stand. As a result, they were condemned and led away to be executed. The men didn't know whether they would be delivered from the fire. All they knew was that they would not fall down and worship an idol. Are you ready to take a stand for God no matter what? When you stand for God, you will stand out. It may be painful and it may not always have a happy ending. Be prepared to say, if he rescues me or if he doesn't, I will serve only God. The blazing furnace. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw him into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed and in their pants, turbans, and robes, and other garments. And because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the freed men in. So Shadrach, and Meshach, and Abednego, security tied fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped in amazement and acclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up free men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men abound walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not been touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's command and were willing to die rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make this decree: if any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego, they will be torn limb from them, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. So I'm gonna read just 3 pages for now until later.